So, there I was. It was around the beginning of June 2016, and I just found myself in an interesting situation. By luck, fate, or a curse, as some may say, I purchased a friend's old sailboat, a Hunter 25.5 that I knew by the name Ohana. I'd been out sailing on her in years past, in the glory days of the Great Salt Lake, when the water was high and drought was but a memory in the minds of few. These were great times for the lake. The yacht club was in full swing, operating weekly races and frequent gatherings. My friend had even lived on the boat for a while, during which time he'd spent writing one of his many books. Unfortunately for Ohana and for most of the boats moored at the Great Salt Lake, the water level had severely dropped, and she, along with nearly 100 others, were pulled out of the water to sit on boat stands and trailers in the parking lot, which for years looked like a sort of sailboat graveyard. And there she sat. It was sad to see her and all the others left, practically abandoned. My friend had since moved on to Alabama. I spoke with him on a few occasions to gauge his interest in selling Ohana, or even see if he was interested in towing her out somewhere closer to him. Personally, I've logged a few thousand nautical miles, mostly from years of sailing all over the Mediterranean. I also sailed a little bit in California and Hawaii as well. Ohana was almost half the size of what I was used to cruising on. But when my friend presented me the opportunity to buy her for a good price, I couldn't pass it up. It was high tide and time for Ohana to get the love and attention that she deserved. Now, for starters, getting pulled out of the lake all those years earlier may not have been such a bad thing after all. After consecutive seasons of floating in water, which is many times saltier than the ocean, the cast iron keel had lost all of its protective barrier and other special paint coatings. Exposed iron had rusted into great big bubbles. Returning the keel to near original condition proved to be a major part of the restoration. Easily 100 man-hours were spent just in grinding and preparing the keel. And then there were the subsequent treatments, coatings, and products which were then applied. Of everything I did on Ohana, this was by and far the one thing which I would never want to do again. Well, that being said, I feel like I did a pretty damn good job on it, all the way down to fairing the contour to follow the NACA profile. Along with proper treatment of the keel came a full scrape and sanding of the hull, removing all of the old anti-fouling and getting it down to the original gel coat. Now, luckily, there were no blisters at all on the 33-year-old hull, and what few imperfections she did have were all carefully filled in and faired over. At this time, it was decided that it would be nice to refresh the overall color scheme, bring it into the 21st century. A modern but classic white and blue design was settled on. For those, final and many coats of finish were applied. The entire hull, from keel bottom to the top of the freeboard, were given multiple applications of a two-part epoxy barrier coat. After removing nearly all of the topside hardware, the entire deck was scrubbed clean, wiped down with dewaxing solvent, then thoroughly sanded past any oxidized gel coat. The pop top and companionway sliding hatch were also removed at this time and worked on separately inside my garage. All of the major crazing, chips, and cracks were all ground down, filled back in with either 3M marine filler, kind of Bondo with fiberglass pre-mixed in, only costing many, many times more than its automotive counterpart. In fact, I quickly came to find out that anything with the term marine grade, or just marine in the name, would end up costing almost double that of what I'd expect to normally pay. Most of the time with due cause, but sometimes it seemed like it was just a marketing ploy. Nevertheless, I didn't cut corners when it came to doing the job right. Now, back to the boat. The pop top had begun to delaminate, so I very carefully filled the core with epoxy and chopped fiberglass strands and bonded it all back together. The deck was given the same care, and a few holes which were no longer needed were also filled back in at this time. Then, after another solvent wipe down, coated the deck with a two-part epoxy product from Interlux called Perfection, another two-part epoxy-based product which is meant to wear tough and is perfect for this application. One season in, and the deck still looks as good today as the day I painted it. The rudder is a bit similar to the pop top. It's two fiberglass halves over a foam core with a metal membrane of sorts. The fiberglass had opened up all around the seam, but at least it had plenty of time to dry out after years of sitting on the hard. I ground out and beveled the entire seam and also cut out a few soft spots which weren't that bad after all. The entire edge of the rudder was then covered in a tightly woven fiberglass tape and laid up in epoxy. Extra layers of fiberglass were applied to the leading edge and the bottom edge, as well as the upper and lower gudgeons and the tiller pocket. The same 6 or 7 layers of paint were then applied to the rudder as were applied to the hull. Now next in the resurrection was all of the boat hardware itself, hundreds of parts. From replacing bronze and stainless screws, machine screws, nuts and bolts, to disassembling the masthead, boom, gooseneck, winches, clutches, deck organizers, and replacing sheaves, bushings, springs, and other pieces, most of which had to be ordered in from points all over the United States. Some parts were soaked in a mild acid to remove years of tarnish and oxidation. Some were sanded, and even some parts were bead blasted. All parts were then either polished back to a mirror finish or painted with multiple coats of enamel or epoxy paint. The mast wiring was replaced, which originally was just one cable running halfway up the mast to the steaming light. A whole new cable was added, running all the way up to the masthead to power the new LED anchor light. A few hundred hours were easily spent just in the refurbishment of all of the boat hardware inside and out. Well, if you made it this far, you know that not much was left untouched, and I'll admit I left out quite a bit of detail just for the sake of keeping this as short as possible. But if you're like me, you'd rather spend your hard-earned money knowing what you're getting, rather than throwing money at something and hoping you're not getting a lemon or a basket full of them. So with everything that I have done to the boat behind us, here's what I haven't done, or might I say, what I would do down the road if I were to keep Ohana. She could use some new sails. She's wearing 2 sails made by Raleigh Tasker out of Australia. Well, they're still pretty crisp and certainly still usable, but in keeping with the spirit of work done on the boat overall, it would be quite fitting to give her 2 new sails to complete the renovation. A new head sail and a new mainsail, both exact fit and made by Raleigh Tasker, can be bought right through Amazon for only $5.99 and $6.99 respectively. Now the next thing I'd do would be to mask off the non-skid areas on the deck, give them a quick sanding with some bronze wool, then roll on some non-skid paint like Interlux Interdeck. The whole shebang would cost under $100. This would give just a little more grip when the deck is wet. She's nice and shiny as it is, but when it gets wet and with certain types of shoes, it can get a little bit slippery. Adding some non-skid paint, that'd fix this. After that, maybe replace the mainsail cover with a nice new blue one to match the rest of the exterior. A tiller clutch, like the one that's sold by Wavefront Marine, would be a nice addition as well. This would put you back about $75. Makes for a nice, precise tiller control. Now for now, I've just been using a length of rope tied off to the sides of the push bit with a few lashes wrapped around the tiller handle. Yeah, you'll see that later in the video. That can slip over time and it's not as exact. I do have a Bimini top ready to fit on a Bimini frame, but I haven't ordered the frame yet. For the time being, when I've wanted shade, I've just thrown the Bimini top over the boom and lashed it to the tow rails. And beyond that, you may want to add some string lights or a disco ball, more speakers, or even a TV. Hey, the choice is yours. Now, I'm surprised you've made it this far, and your reward for getting through this lengthy ad descripto is this. Sit back, enjoy some home video of me sailing around, catching sunsets, making pina coladas, listening to music, sipping on the occasional rum and coke, having a little wine and cheese. Enjoy.